would you like to expand your knowledge about adoption and familial bonds? Then be sure to listen to my interview with Julie McGue, an American writer, a domestic adoptee, an identical twin, a mother, and a grandmother. You'll truly enjoy Julie's take on finding out who you are, where you belong, and making sense of it all. You'll learn about the complex topic of adoption viewed through the lens of trauma and loss. You'll find out about the stigma, the rejection, and betrayal often associated with adoption. You'll find out about the 5-year quest by Julie and her twin sister to find and reunite with their birth relatives. And you're going to love hearing about the meaningful relationships that Julie and her twin sister now have with their birth relatives. Come join Julie and me for a special, touching interview. Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to have the pleasure of interviewing American writer, domestic adoptee, and identical twin Julie McGue, who writes about finding out who we are, where you belong, and making sense of it through her 3 remarkable books and other venues. Julie's award-winning debut memoir, titled Twice a Daughter, A Search for Identity, Family, and Belonging, is currently being considered for a TV pilot. Her book, titled Belonging, Conversations on Adoption, Family, and Kinship, is a thought-provoking collection of essays, and her newly released memoir, Twice the Family, a memoir of love, loss, and sisterhood, is a profound exploration of familial bonds. Julie's work has graced various prestigious platforms. Her essays can be found in several anthologies, and she also shares her insights through her weekly blog and monthly column in the feature newspapers. I'm looking forward to talking with Julie, who splits her time between Northwest Indiana and Sarasota, Florida, about the complex topic of adoption viewed through the lens of trauma and loss, the stigma, shame, rejection, and betrayal often associated with adoption, how her family's profound journey to wholeness following the passing of her youngest sister, Susie, how our responses to brokenness can shape the trajectories of our lives, and more. This promises to be a powerful interview, brimming with meaningful insights that will surely expand our knowledge about adoption and familial bonds and touch our hearts. Hi, Julie. Welcome.
Thank you for that very warm, exhaustive introduction. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I really like my listeners, my audience, to know the caliber of the people I'm talking to. So when they are learning from you or becoming enlightened, they really know you know what you speak. And that's why I really like to tell people who you are before we even begin. So let's begin, because you have so many important things to teach us today, Julie, and share with us. So let's start with your story. Why were you and your sister Jenny put up for adoption as infants? How did your adoptive parents' difficulties building the dream of having a big American family lead them to adopt you and your twin sister, Jenny?
Well, we did not know until we were in our 50s why we were placed for adoption, which is got to do with the closed adoption system in the United States. No information was passed between my adoptive parents and my birth parents, which is very different than the system that's in place now. So we did come to find out that our birth mother was an unwed mother, and our birth father chose not to marry her. And so, given what the climate was in society in the 1950s and 60s, she had no recourse other than to place us for adoption. My adoptive parents were an infertile couple for 5 or 6 years in the beginning of their marriage. Also, at that time in society, there was such a huge emphasis and push on family building. If you didn't have a baby within the first year or two of your marriage, you were considered a failure. So my parents tried for a long time and then chose to try for adoption. My mom loves to tell the story that she doesn't know why she did it, but she checked the box next to twins. And one day she was teaching her class at a Catholic grammar school, and she got a call to come to the office. And they asked her if she really meant to check that box for twins. And she said, yes, I did, of course. And they said, then come down to Catholic Charities in Chicago because twin girls are waiting for you. So that is the beginning of our story.
That's the beginning of your story. You had what's called a closed adoption. So can you tell us about the logistics of that? And are adoptions still closed today, or is that no longer done?
Back in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, closed adoption and private adoption were really the only vehicles to adopt a baby. It protected the rights of the adoptive parents and the birth parents, meaning both could parent or not parent without any interference by the other set of parents. There was no contact whatsoever. No information was exchanged, meaning I didn't know if I was Irish or German. I had no idea what my birth parents' eye or hair color was. Absolutely nothing. And then in the 1990s, open adoption became the norm in society, meaning the birth parents had more control over who the adoptive parents were going to be. And they could also establish a plan of contact. And that varies. Right now, you can have contact all the way up until you're 18 years old with exchange of phone calls and letters or no contact. So it's something that's mutually agreed upon as opposed to the adoption agencies basically thrusting the state laws on everybody.
It feels like they became enlightened that adoptees really need to have their information and have it not be so close. I got a kick out of your story about how stern the nun was who, with her parents, right? Who was in charge of your lives.
Yes. I mean, any of us that have gone to private schools, and whether it was Catholic or not, knows the fearsome nature of those in charge. And you go up against them once in your life and you realize, not again.
Could you please describe the complex topic of adoption, which you talk about so beautifully in your books, viewed through the lens of trauma and loss? And why is adoption often associated with and surrounded by stigma, shame, rejection, and betrayal? I kind of understand it, but I'd really like to hear from your point of view.
A loss is baked into the whole equation for everybody that's in the adoption triangle. For the birth parents, it's not having the right to raise your biological child or have contact with them in the case of closed adoption. Certainly for the adoptive parents, although all those years of infertility led to a lot of insecurity and shame for them also that they were not able to parent or conceive and carry their own biological child. And then also for adoptees, we have the shame and stigma of our birth parents essentially giving us away. I mean, we could put nice language around it, Irene, and say we were placed and it was the right choice for everybody. But to the adopted child, it does feel like you've been given away. And that loss of identity, which we didn't get with closed adoption, and then the lack of belonging that we have with our birth parents is really the big trauma. Nancy Verrier is a very famous person. She's the one that coined the term the primal wound. And the primal wound for the adoptee is that severing of ties between an adopted child from the very beginning. One of my daughters just had her third little boy, and I watched her cuddle and snuggle with him, and that skin-to-skin contact that pediatricians are saying is so vital and so important to this child's well-being. Well, back in the day, my birth mother never saw us, never held us. She was advised against that. And it was probably a very traumatic experience. I will, offer a caveat though, because Catholic Charities had a firm policy of adopting twins or multiples together. I grew up with a full sibling, and I'm very cognizant of how special that is. I never really had to wonder who I looked like. We're identical twins. She was right there. Her mannerisms were my mannerisms. We shared similar thoughts and ideas. So my experience was as beautiful as it could be given the circumstances, because
there's that issue of abandonment, but you're not totally abandoned because you have your sister. Thank God, right?
Yes, correct.
Right? Can you describe how many of your adopted parents' children, how was your family? How many were adopted? How many were naturally born? And could you tell us about your youngest sister, Susie, with her special needs and the heartbreak of her sudden death?
I will. So my twin sister and I were the first, and my parents kept their name on the list. And 2 years later, they adopted a little boy. Very proud that they had this little family of 3. And then my mom kept getting pregnant. And fortunately for her, she was able to carry to full term 3 biological children. In between there, she had a stillborn, which I deeply remember as 13 years old. And the idea that a child died before they was born was a really impactful event. And then the youngest sister, Susie, my mom must have contracted rubella when she was pregnant, probably volunteering in the school system or something. And my sister was born with cataracts. She had surgery. That being what it was in the day, she lost her lenses in her eyes, and she was legally blind. Unbeknownst to us, she also had a heart problem. And when she was 3.5, she got a virus that just seemed like it was a cold, and it went to her heart, and she died very suddenly. So I was 16 at the time, so she would have been 13 years younger than me. And it thrust our family into a very dark place. My mom had been taking her to the doctor when she passed. There was a lot of trauma around that event for my mom.
I remember in your book you talked about they even thought your mother murdered.
Yeah, there was an accusation because she was so well cared for to have died so suddenly, which we need to talk about that because that wasn't something any of us knew about until I started writing the book. And so my mom was in a dark place. She went through some depression, removed herself, I think, emotionally from the family, which was in itself a very traumatic event. She wasn't present emotionally, and my sister and I were doing a lot of parental kind of chores, grocery shopping and caring for the other kids. It was very hard on my parents' marriage, but I think because of their shared values, strong family values, their deep faith, they pulled through it. My mom got some help.
Thank goodness.
The rest of us didn't really get any help because back then in the 1970s,
it wasn't like a thing to do, right?
No, talk therapy was not a thing. There was no family counseling. My mom got help and put on some antidepressant medications, and she came back to us. It took a good couple years. And certainly my sister was, we continued to celebrate and honor her on her birthday, her day of death, and still do. I think, and I do say this in the book, Irene, that she was a change agent for our family. Her small, short presence on this earth with us, we all became incredibly sensitive to anybody that had a special needs, handicap, older person. I like to think that maybe was her purpose, to teach us to be more compassionate, observant people.
Yeah. Sounds like in a way she was her own little angel
Yes.
for all of you. But when you did this compound your feelings of emotional abandonment, I know that it brought you closer to your sister, but how did you deal with that? Because your mother, during that period, you bonded with her and now she left you again, right?
Yeah.
Mother, bye-bye.
It really did. It was like a slap to the other side of the head. Here we had our first mother, our birth mother, that physically and emotionally abandoned us to another family. And then the woman that was raising us, who we loved and cared for us, had stepped away too. So I think the double whammy of that was really, really tough. You know, it's interesting. One of the things I tried to do in the book, Twice the Family, was put a lens for the reader on what life looks like through an adoptee's eyes. We see things different. For example, back in the 1960s and 70s, corporal punishment was a big thing. You know, you got a swat or a slap or whatever.
I can remember it well.
Yeah. It wasn't just sit down and be quiet and take a time out. It was some kind of physical experience to be punished. And that didn't sit well with me. I really did not do well with that. I had some inner thoughts, which I share in the book, about, I wonder if my other mother would treat me this way. And so the lens of being an adoptee is definitely part of the book.
Yeah, that's fascinating story. And you also make a statement that I'd love you to speak about, which is each of us, regardless of who we are and where we come from, carries within us our own brand of brokenness. Can you explain that to us?
You know, I wrote that and it came out on the paper and I thought, where the heck did that come from? Which, you know, is another conversation about what our subconscious is mulling about. And when we write, those beautiful thoughts come out. And I do think that that's true. None of us get the perfect life. We don't get the perfect set of parents, set of circumstances. And it's really called upon us through the help of others to make the better of our situations and see the upside of it. I really believe that that's the recipe towards leading a productive and a healthy, well-being kind of life.
Well, that blends right into my next question, because how do the ways we deal with this brokenness and how we handle other vulnerabilities, faults, traumas, and failures determine the people we become in the course of our lives? You speak to that also.
Yeah, I mean,
what about the choices we make?
It's about the choices we make. And I think if we look around and find the support systems that we need, for me, it was always my twin sister. We shared a room. We had a lot of conversations, she and I. If you don't have a twin sister, possibly you have another sibling you're close to, or an aunt, or maybe it's a healthcare professional. We have to draw on other people to receive care and support. Somebody very famous, I can't remember who it is, said that, you know, we draw courage from each other, and we're called to do that. We need to reach out to other people to ask for help. In turn, we must offer help to people that are in need.
Right. I mean, some people aren't so fortunate to have someone outside their situation kind of help them or validate them or point the way. I mean, our listeners know my story, and I had a very dysfunctional childhood, and I had one aunt, not even blood relative, married into the family, who told me, honey, you're fine. It's them. I mean, that validation, right? So much of a difference. And I was abandoned also. So like, it's, you know, very interesting.
And one of the things that it took me a long time to use as a label for myself, and you just used a label, abandoned, is the word orphan. I never once thought of myself as an orphan, but of course I was. I lived in an orphanage for 3 weeks before my family adopted us. And I think we have to be careful with those labels, applying them to ourselves before we're ready to deal with them. But certainly you were abandoned. And so was I. And we overcame that. So that's what is the beautiful thing about your podcast.
I mean, it's so little, they had so little compassion and empathy, and it still pervades our world today, unfortunately. I really want to talk about your adoption search because this is fascinating. So at the age of 48, Julie is prompted by a health scare when you were sent for a breast biopsy, and you realize the importance of knowing your medical history, which was impossible due to those closed adoption laws at that time. And it was my impression your husband really wanted you to find out your origin and prompted you to investigate, right? So this launches you into a 5-year quest by you and your sister Jenny to find and reunite with your birth relatives, which included obstacles, rigid state adoption statutes, and misinformation. Why does this feel so familiar? Like it's all still going on. So tell us about your story and what you went through. It must have been so heartbreaking and frustrating and daunting. And we all thank God it looks like you're fine.
Well, the first thing was my husband putting the screws on me to get at this, because between my sister and I, we have 6 children. So it really was about me, but it was also about passing on some medical history to our children. My sister said, yes, let's do it. Let's try to find this. We did not have our adoption papers. My parents still held them, and which meant that we had to talk to them first. When we were children growing up, my parents always said, we'll help you whenever you get to that day. I think inside, I probably had a good idea that it wasn't going to go as easily as that, and it didn't. My mom was not happy about this. I think her fear of losing that coveted role of mom that she so fought for with all of those infertility issues, etc. She was not happy. She didn't draw a line in the sand, but it was very clear that she was not happy about it. But our first pass was an adoption search agency that couldn't get very far. We came to realize our birth mom used an alias, which was entirely legal back then. And there was no name for...
Wow, well, that's even harder. So you didn't even have your real mom's name.
No, I did not. And it turned out that we ended up working with an intermediary service through the state of Illinois, which was sanctioned by a judge. And they opened all of the records through Catholic Charities. And my birth mom's real name was in there. An unusual name, so she was easily found. Unfortunately, so I've got the health scare, my mom's not happy with me, and then my birth mom comes back and says, no, I don't want anything to do with this. So we had a lot of obstacles to get through.
So how did they get around that obstacle when your birth mother didn't want to? I mean, I got my life, but I probably didn't even tell anyone what happened. How did you get around that?
Circle back to the health issues. The doctors all wrote letters and said, at the very least, she has to provide the medical history. So we did send it to her. She sent it back. We had the health history, which started the whole thing, but we didn't have our birth father's name, so we couldn't get his side of it. Fast forward, time passes about 6 more months, and she has a change of heart and contacts the intermediary, and then everything rolled out from them, exchanging cards and letters. She told me what I thought was my birth father's name. It doesn't turn out to be the right name, but I don't want to ruin the book for the listeners.
Let's give it away.
Let's just say I do find everything that I do need. I don't have direct contact with everybody. But the most beautiful thing, which makes it a good story to read, is that I find a brother and a sister that I don't know I have. They don't know about us. And once I get in conversation with my half-brother, we realize that our paths have been crossing in time for a while, waiting for us to figure out how we are connected. So I'll leave everybody with that.
Leave everyone in suspense, and they have to read the rest of the story.
Anybody that has any kind of spiritual leanings will say, this is truly a God wink moment. All of those things. So,
well, that was the next question I had for you. Some of the uncanny synchronicities you experienced while you were searching. Do you want to share any of that, or should they wait to read the book?
They should. They should just know that there is a connection with my brother, and that connection with my brother ends up pulling my adoptive mom back into the scene. She's happy. She forgives all of these things ever happened. and realizes that maybe she could even exchange a letter with my birth mom. So
Oh, wonderful.
a lot of beautiful things happened. It took 5 years of hard work to get that done. And we sit in a better place today, 15 years later.
That's amazing. So now, do you regularly see your birth relatives? Do you have close relationships with them?
I text message a lot with some aunts and uncles. I have a first cousin that I see a lot here in Florida.
Wonderful.
My birth mom is in a senior center, not in great health. So COVID caused a lot of issues with us seeing each other in person. But we talk on all the major events and holidays. And she's 92. And my adoptive mom is also 92.
That's wonderful. Has your adopted mom met your birth mom?
No, they've exchanged letters, and geographically, it would really be hard to get them together.
I'm sure your birth mom is very grateful to your adopted mom.
She is.
In many ways. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. And the other thing you talk about is how journaling added meaning and depth to your life, and also a healing self for you since your late husband, Steve, transitioned. And I'm sorry about that for you, for your pain. I've experienced something similar. So would you like to talk about your journaling and how that's helped you and why that's so important to you? And I think that led to your book, right?
Yes. So I had a lot of teenage journals, and journaling I did off and on as a new wife and young mother. I used all of that as source material when I was writing Twice a Daughter, musings about what a teenage girl thought about. Also in Twice the Family, I used some of that material. What was interesting for me in writing this next book, Twice the Family, the last 5 chapters are about my romance and relationship with my husband. So I was writing those 2 years after he died, and I was dreading it. I didn't think it was going to be easy. It wasn't easy. It was exhausting, but it was beautiful because I relived those very precious moments of new love, and writing about them was tremendously healing. It also, interestingly enough, a lot of the stories that I wrote about, my kids didn't know. So the book turned out to be a family history of my life, but also their father's life. So I would encourage any reader, whether it's or your listeners, to write, whether it's for publication, for posterity, or for others, because others do learn from our stories. Memoir is one of those big genres that, we like to get inside other people's lives. We're all a little voyeuristic, and we like to see how people handle adversity, how they react to situations, because we learn from what they do and how they act.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Very understandable. Did you go to a grief counselor, Julie? And what support groups have been helping you now that you're on this healing journey with your grief? Can you share that with us? Because the premise of this podcast is that we should all go for healing.
Yes. Well, I've got 3 little tidbits about healing. So when I suffered this devastating rejection from my birth mom, I turned to Catholic Charities again, and they have a post-adoption support group in Chicago. And that social worker instituted these workshops about every 2-3 months. And it was adoptive parents, birth parents, and adoptees in the same room. That experience of being able to listen to the brokenness, to use that word we talked about, of birth mothers helped me understand my birth mother and all the obstacles that she faced in society, but in relationships and in making contact with my sister and I. So that support group is ongoing. I still participate. I think it's important for those of us that have gone through the whole cycle successfully and dealt with struggles to give back to the rest of the community. And then when my husband died, I joined a support group with other widows. We meet only online, and it's a tremendous tool for all of us to share our same experiences. There's something about not feeling alone in the misery that you feel that is very uplifting. The third point is one of the things that came out of the grief support group was the idea of using a medium to heal even further. And
Tell us about that.
I have used the medium several times. She's very, very good. She's become a little too famous, so now I can't get into her whenever I want to. But I met with her about a year after my husband passed away. I was nervous about it. He believed that once you died, and that's it. So, part of me was like, is he right or am I right? I turned out to be right. He showed up front and center. She asked him a lot of questions and validated that he was exactly who he was, laughing that, of course, he was thrilled to say I was right. So a lot of healing came out of that. And I continue to use mediums when I have some questions about things. The other thing that I used a medium for goes back to the book, Twice the Family. I collaborated with my mother and my sister on some of the chapters, especially the ones dealing with Susie's death. And I could tell from talking to my mom that I wasn't getting the whole story. There was something I didn't know. Met with the medium. I said, my sister died. This is the situation. She said, your sister's here with us. She wants you to tell this story, and you've got to ask more questions of your mom. You need to ask her about the police.
About the what?
The police.
The police.
And we won't say too much about that because it unveils in the book, but I didn't know anything about the police. None of my siblings did. I went to my mom and I said, is there something about the police that I don't know about the story? And reluctantly, she spilled everything. She told the whole story. And I could tell she probably would have gone to her grave without sharing all of that. And she felt better. She felt better that she was not carrying this burden, this secret. So the medium is present in my life. I will always be seeking their advice and counsel for healing, and I don't have any problems with that. And some people may. It's totally up to you whether you believe in it or not. But
Really, I interviewed so many mediums on this podcast, and a medium literally saved my life when my husband transitioned, and he came through for 40 minutes, and I didn't even believe in any of this. And I just want to share with everyone a really quick story because you're prompting a story of mine. When my husband and I went through this accident, and I had all this stuff happen to me, but when my husband passed, 2 months after he passed, I was led to a medium, and it changed my life because he came through for 40 minutes with information he could not possibly know. But the other thing that happened was I didn't know who to share it with because at this time, now it's a little more accepted, but at that time, it was like, woo-woo, you're crazy, right? So I couldn't tell anyone in my world except I had a sister-in-law who was spiritual, and we thought she was crazy. So we weren't really talking to her when Saul transitioned because we thought she was cuckoo. Well, when I heard from Saul through this medium, who could I call? I called my sister-in-law, and she said to me, thank goodness you called me because 2 weeks after Saul died, he contacted me. I said, he contacted you? She said, yes. And I said to him, why are you contacting me, Saul? We weren't talking when you passed. And he said, I know because I thought you were crazy, but you're not. And I'm on the other side, and you're the only one who's open, and I have messages for Irene. So it's a very similar story. So your husband and my husband both said, we thought it was crazy, but hey, I'm really glad.
Yeah, the medium has been helpful to a lot of my children. The youngest one was very close to her dad, and she was younger, mid-20s when he passed away, and being able to make that connection. In fact, she sent me a picture today. She was having a coffee with a business associate, and it's been 3 years since he transitioned, but on the lid of the coffee cup was a little shamrock. And that was the name of his company, Shamrock Company.
Oh, wow.
So she knew that he was part of this business conversation. And
He's giving you messages. He's giving you
Yeah.
signs. How wonderful. How wonderful.
Yeah.
Julie, why do you believe that it is important to seek support or counseling to help us heal?
We're not naturally born with all the tools to do this on our own. And there are so many gifted people out there that are and have that training. And we should take advantage of it because it will accelerate our personal growth and transformation like nothing else.
I could not agree more. And do you have a special offer for our podcast audience today?
I do. I put together a little bundle of things, a couple of chapters that didn't make it into the book that I loved, and some very special pictures. So that will be available to your listeners.
We'll make sure that it's available on the show notes. And what is the Julie McGue tip for finding joy in life? You've certainly known all sides of the emotional.
My biggest for everybody, and this is going to be hard, sit back and listen. Listen compassionately. Listen hard. If you do not understand the shoes that someone else wears, please try for a second to share that perspective with them instead of injecting your own judgment or opinions. Just listen.
That's beautiful. And does that help you to find joy when you're doing that?
Yes, it does. And I usually, that little pause of trying to listen hard, I learn something about myself because I try that hard.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Julie. Thank you because you're educating us and you're enlightening us today with all these meaningful insights about adoption, familial bonds, grief, loss, faith, belonging, the unique bonds between siblings, and so much more. I can see why educating those within and outside the adoption world gives you pleasure and great purpose. And I want to thank you truly from my heart for this very special interview that I am sure has opened many minds and touched many hearts.
Thank you, Irene. I just love following you and your shows.
Thank you. I'm grateful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And as I like to say, Julie, as you would know, to be continued. Thank you. And many, many blessings.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Grief and Rebirth. Remember, you can dive deeper into everything we've discussed by checking out the show notes and all past episodes at ireneweinberg.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and wherever you love to hang out online. Plus, we're on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and never miss a video. For those of you listening, you'll find links to my 2 books, Good to the Last Drop and They Serve Bagels in Heaven, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see those books listed right above. So don't miss out. And here comes a special treat. If you sign up for Audible as a first-time user using my link, which you can find in the show notes, you can get They Serve Bagels in Heaven for free. And finally, people often ask me what I read, what I use, and what I recommend for healing and self-care. So I've carefully curated a compilation of those items to share with you. You can head over to kit.co/grief and rebirth to check them out. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, many blessings.